Good evening and welcome into another edition of Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Yes, we've got a sleek new look. Unfortunately, it's just the graphics and not us. We can't make ourselves look any better. We apologize for having to look at us. Mike Wags, Wagon Connect, alongside Joe Hamilton, Scott Tobin. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing this fine evening?
Doing all right, man. How are you guys?
I'm pretty good, man. It's been a good day so far, and this is a great way to end it off.
Well, I can tell you this. My shirt says it all. Not today.
What is that design on your shirt? Like, what is that?
It's an AT-AT. It's a busted out AT-AT, you know, like after Luke Skywalker knocks it down or Wedge Antilles toe cables it around and pushes it forward, you know.
Yeah, okay.
Have you seen Star Wars?
Actually, it had to start from the first episode. I'm uncultured.
Whoa, hold on, wait, back it up. We were gonna go into sports, but wait, you've never seen Star Wars?
No.
I'm speechless.
Yes, I'm an uncultured swine, I guess. If you want to call
it swine, but wow, like so every time I've talked about Star Wars, made references, you haven't really gotten them, then have you?
The most Star Wars I've seen were Family Guy episodes.
That's not Star Wars.
Yeah, but I mean, they did so many of them though, so I know it wasn't the exact.
Oh, nowhere close to the exact. It was just some story beats was all it was. Great. Now you think Obi-Wan Kenobi is a pedophile. That's not good. Oh, goodness gracious.
Hey, I will have to catch up on it. It may take me a while, but
all right, Lester, you've got a friend in Lester, Joe. He has not seen them either, but I am making it your mission that before the end of the year, okay, I'm giving you plenty of time. Before the end of the year, you have to at least have completed the 9 main movies to the Star Wars universe. So episodes 1 through 9, you have to see. Solo, Rogue One, I would actually say watch those as well. But at the very least, the 9 stories of the Star Wars Skywalker saga, you have to at least watch. So I'm giving you the end of the year. That's your mission if you choose to accept it.
I will accept. I mean, it's a long year, so it will happen.
All righty. Well, let's dive into sports now. Unless Scott, you got a mission on top of that?
No, I'm still speechless that you haven't seen any of the movies. You have to watch them in order too, because if you watch them out of order, it doesn't make sense. So you need to watch all 9 in order. And then you also, I don't know about Solo. I wasn't that high on that. Rogue One, you definitely need to check out. Solo, I just have a problem with anybody else playing Han Solo but Harrison Ford.
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit difficult to get past. I mean, it wasn't a bad movie per se, but seeing someone other than Harrison Ford as Han Solo definitely was a little bit jarring. Now, this is the question. Now, I watched them because of how old I am. I watched them 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9 because at the time the prequels hadn't come out. You're talking about watching it 1 through 9, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to try to do it, I think you should. You know, somebody now, I'd say watch them because then you get the whole full story.
See, now I have heard a very intriguing way of watching the movies. Something I don't have it exact, but somebody was like, if you really want to get a really interesting take on watching it, you watch 4 and 5 first. Then when the reveal happens in 5, you go back and watch 1 and 2, and then you go and then you watch episode 6, then you watch 3, and then you watch 7, 8, and 9 potentially. But it could also be 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, and then come back to 6. That I've heard that as an interesting way of watching it as well, especially if someone watching it the first time. You get a little bit of wet in the beak with 4 and 5, and you're like, oh, this is good. Then you get to see certain backstories that kind of make you get into episode 6. So I'm thinking 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, then 6, 7, 8, 9. That would be an interesting way of watching it as well. Although 1 through 9 isn't bad either.
Creates for a long weekend, that's for sure.
Or you could go 1, 2, 3. I mean, if you're going to watch them, I guess really in order, you should watch 1, 2, 3, then Rogue One, then 4, 5, 6, because of the way Rogue One is.
Oh yeah, you have to watch Rogue. I think you have to watch Rogue One as well. I mean, some people may not find it appointment viewing, but I definitely think Rogue One fits in there because outside of everything that happens early on, the last 5 minutes, the Darth Vader scene totally makes it. I mean, it's everything that a Star Wars fan wanted to see was the badassery of Darth Vader. That's it. And that's what I'm hoping for that we might get now that Hayden Christensen's coming back to play Darth Vader in the Obi-Wan series. Maybe that parlays into either like a rated R Darth Vader movie or maybe just a Darth Vader television series and just get to see some really, really cool Darth Vader stuff.
Yeah, so it actually Weezer chimes in. Should I start with Rogue One?
Once again, it all kind skip 1 through 3. No, Weezer. You know what? Looking back, yeah, there are some beats and some story elements from the prequel series that you're just like, why? But if you really want to like dive deep into the Star Wars mythology and all that kind of stuff, you have to watch 1 through 3 because they really hit a lot of really good beats as far as the political aspect of it and just how much of it has crumbled away and the haughtiness of the Jedi. I mean, it doesn't do a great job, like dialogue wise. The action's really, really good, but there are some pieces that if you're watching them, you go, "Oh, I get it. It makes sense." And this is someone that I watched it when they first came out, thought they were okay. Then kind of soured on him a little bit, but now I've kind of liked what I'm seeing for it. If you like C-SPAN, you'll like 1 through 3. Yeah, it's a lot to get through, but everything leading up to it, and then the whole battle and thing between Obi-Wan and Anakin, forget about it. You have to watch the Clone Wars too. If you watch the Clone Wars cartoon series, it makes it even better.
Okay, now I got some homework.
Oh, you basically lost your life.
And when you watch one, just forget that Jar Jar Binks is in it because he does try to ruin it for everybody, but he gets better after that.
Although you heard the Darth Jar Jar theory too, right?
I saw that the other day. Yeah,
the Darth Jar Jar theory. When it first came out, I was kind of like, no, come on, don't do it. But then, like, the more I got into it, reading it, I'm like, that would have been the most epic twist. That would have been like M. Night Shyamalan directed the prequel trilogy if he would have twisted it out that Jar Jar Binks was the Dark Lord of the Sith. That would have been something else. Yeah, but Jar Jar, yeah, I can't say anything really too great about Jar Jar, although he is I almost think that Palpatine put him in that position because he could be manipulated. He's the guy who helped create the Grand Army of the Republic. He's the one who voted in the absence of Padme. So there might have been some pulling of strings to get him to that spot. So I'm a Star Wars freak, so I can go down different tangents all over the place, and we've already wasted 10 minutes of the show talking about that. Honestly, this is probably my thing for tonight is talking about Star Wars.
There you go.
All right, let's talk about some actual sports that went down today. And yeah, we'll get to the Blues here in a little bit. They're still playing against the Sharks. Coyote Sharks. It's the Sharks now. They're not playing the Coyotes anymore. It's third period. They're trailing 2-1 with just under 10 minutes to go. But the big news that came out today, not necessarily affecting the St. Louis area, but the NFL market as a whole, Carson Wentz finally got dealt. And it was to the team that I thought, and I think everybody was thinking he would eventually go to, the Indianapolis Colts. But the return was not all that good for the Philadelphia Eagles. What are your guys' thoughts on the trade that went down today between Philadelphia and Indianapolis?
I mean, I think you're right. I think that was where he was always going to go. That's where Wentz wanted to go. I mean, there were rumors yesterday that he was kind of blocking a trade to the Bears because he was really trying to make this Indy thing happen. And when you look at it, it doesn't look great because it's a third-round pick in 2021 and then a second-round pick in 2022. But that second-round pick, if the Colts go to the playoffs and Wentz plays 70% of the snaps, that pick in 2023 becomes a first-round pick. So if it ends up being a first and a third, then the return looks a little better, I think.
Yeah, just looking at it now, I mean, do you think that maybe the return was based off its performance over the last couple of years, or lack thereof, and not being healthy? Does that have anything to do with it?
I think a lot of it is kind of like the Nolan Arenado Colorado Cardinals thing. Carson Wentz had control of this thing in a lot of ways because he had the no trade in his contract. He could control this in a lot of ways. And so I think Philadelphia was desperate. Indy knew it. And Indy said, okay, here's our package. And this is what you get, take it or leave it. Or Carson Wentz will more than likely end up playing in Philadelphia next year. And so I think when it came down to it, the Eagles pretty much had to take that package, just like Colorado kind of got stuck with the Nolan Arenado thing.
Yeah, it was almost like playing a game of chicken, just like you said with the Arenado Cardinal Rocky thing, is Indianapolis needed a quarterback. Okay, the guy they drafted is not ready to go. They needed a quarterback. Phillip Rivers retires. So Philly is basically trying to wait Indianapolis out to really get them to up that offer. Philly doesn't have an absolute need to trade Carson Wentz. They set a date in mind, I think, that said, look, we're going to wait to this point. We know we're going to trade him, but we're going to wait to this point to see what the best deal is possible. And they were hoping that this was the time frame that would push Indianapolis to up that offer a little bit higher, a little bit higher, a little bit higher. And credit to the Colts, they held to their guns knowing that they needed a quarterback. And this is what it was. Philly's desperate. They have to move Wentz. And that's the deal that they took. Now, the thing that I found very interesting was, Jalen Hurts is probably going to be the starting quarterback this year. But Philadelphia has a high draft pick this year, and there's rumors that they still might draft a quarterback as well, which would be surprising to me. But could you guys see that being the case if somebody were to fall that would make sense?
Well, and I asked Scott this last night, and before the show last night, he basically said, why would Philadelphia do that at this point? And I kind of think the same way. I mean, why would you have a stud in Jalen Hurts? He's a stud. I mean, he's looked like he could be a stud and could work in Philly. Give the guy a chance before you draft a quarterback. But go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to what Philly – I mean, they've seen him for an offseason and the regular season a little bit that he played. It comes down to how much they like him. I mean, I did say that last night, but then when you think about it, we got to remember that Jalen Hurts did get pulled in the fourth quarter of that last game of the season last year. And I know a lot of people say it's because Philly just didn't care and Peterson was just giving up on the season. But Hurts was also playing really bad. So, if Philly likes Jalen Hurts, then I don't think you take a quarterback that early. But if they're not sold with the amount of quarterbacks coming out in this draft, they may surprise people and take one in that first pick, or maybe they trade down and take one.
Well, and look at what Washington did back a handful of years ago. They picked RG3 and they brought in Kirk Cousins. So it's not out of the question that you're going to have two young quarterbacks really kind of competing and pushing each other to be the starter. And that's something, competition breeds the best out of people in most cases. And that's exactly the point. They may have a guy there that they almost just cannot pass up. God forbid Trevor Lawrence falls to number 6. Do you let that opportunity pass you up? That's the question that's kind of that you have to ask is there a guy that you just cannot pass up at that spot?
Yeah, I mean, there's almost zero chance that Trevor Lawrence is there at 6, but there's going to be some quarterbacks there, whether it's Justin Fields or Trey Lance or there's some other guys. There's 4 or 5 quarterbacks that are really solid coming out of this draft. So, again, it just all comes down to how much Philadelphia really believes in Jalen Hurts. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Here's a question now. What do the Chicago Bears do now at quarterback? Because the Bears were the team that were really in on Carson Wentz. Where do they pivot to? Or does this open the door for – I know everybody said it's not going to happen, but does this open the door now for Mitchell Trubisky to come back to Chicago next year?
Go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
I don't think at this point they believe in Mitchell Trubisky, so I think he's gone either way. The fact that they would play Nick Foles over him part of this season makes me think, the Mitchell Trubisky.
But they went back to him, though.
they went back to him after what they saw in Nick Foles. Not
so
because,
what are you going to do now?
not confidently though. Were they confident when they went back to him? I don't think so. I felt like they had to because they had no confidence in Nick Foles. So you're in a lose-lose situation there. I mean,
so if it's not Trubisky, where do they go?
do they maybe entertain a trade for Watson?
I've heard that Chicago is one of the teams that is looking at a Deshaun Watson, but after everything they've recently given up to bring guys in like a Khalil Mack, I don't know if they have the draft capital to be able to do that, and they've got other positions that they really need to fill as well. It's not like you bring in Deshaun Watson and all of a sudden everything's golden. You still got to re-sign Allen Robinson. Your running back situation, while okay, isn't great, and at the receiving position, what do you got outside of Robinson? Yeah, you got a couple of decent tight ends, especially in a guy like Kmet. But outside of that, you don't have a whole lot. So essentially, just like Matthew Stafford going to the Rams, Deshaun Watson going to the Bears is basically going, hey, guess what? I'm going from a team with absolutely no offense to a team with absolutely no offense. So for Deshaun Watson, I don't think that's a great move. And I don't think it's a great move for Chicago, at least at this point in time either. I've been pushing Mitchell Trubisky to New Orleans. I think he should and needs to be the heir apparent to Drew Brees there. Jameis Winston, maybe, in Chicago?
That would be interesting. That would be interesting. The thing is, though, Wags, you brought it up earlier. It's like trading to a team that has little to no weapons after being on a team with little to no weapons. And not that he doesn't have any weapons, but there's a reason they haven't played him in New Orleans. I don't know the reason, but there's a reason he hasn't played New Orleans, like as a backup. Even I don't know how many snaps he even took this season in terms of practice. Even
Pretty sure he threw a 50-yard touchdown the last time he threw the ball in New Orleans.
Yeah,
but in the playoffs too. But I don't know if I want to commit to Jameis Winston at this point. I mean, he's had a track record where it's not been good as a starter. So
yeah, he didn't lead the league in touchdown passes one year either. Yeah,
he did.
Yeah. I mean, he also led the league in interceptions or yards. He led the league in yards and interceptions.
Yeah, but it's like a mixed bag with him. So I don't know if you want him leading your team to in the future because you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know if you're going to get a Super Bowl out of it. Why do teams pick quarterbacks? They envision themselves as Super Bowl contenders or Super Bowl champions with him at some point. Am I wrong?
Not every team.
Scott?
Yeah, it just depends. And you do remember that Jameis Winston was the number one pick in the draft a few years ago.
Yeah, he was the number one pick. And what did Tampa envision? A lot of success, maybe a Super Bowl. And it was very underwhelming in Tampa. I think they like where they are. Go ahead.
He didn't have a ton of talent around him in Tampa most of that time either. You got to remember that Tampa had the worst record in the league, which is why he got drafted there. So look what they built around him in those years. Up until this year, it was all built as Jameis Winston was growing with them, and then they let him go because, oh, wait, Tom Brady wanted to come to Tampa. It's not necessarily – they didn't necessarily let Jameis Winston go because they didn't like him, but they had Tom Brady banging on the door wanting to come down there. So you got to look at it that way as well.
You really do. And you're looking at the free agent quarterbacks still available – if they don't go back to a guy like Trubisky, this is your free agent class at quarterback that's available right now. Dak Prescott coming off of major surgery, while Phillip Rivers is retired. Tyrod Taylor, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Cam Newton, Jacoby Brissett, Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco.
Very underwhelming.
Who are you going to go with?
Yeah, very underwhelming. Yeah, you almost. Who do you go with there, Scott? Because it's, again, for me, that's underwhelming as hell.
Yeah, and again, I think Jameis stays in New Orleans, so I don't think that's going to be. I don't think that's going to be a possibility, even if they wanted to, because I think he stays down there. If they don't go Trubisky, I think they either go draft or they make a trade. There were some reports today that they may have a little bit of interest in Sam Darnold. somebody like that might be available. Marcus Mariota is probably going to be available. So maybe you go one of those ways and then draft a quarterback and, hope you buy yourself a couple of years. I even saw a report today that Alex Smith may be in consideration in Chicago.
That would be interesting. I mean, a game manager, somebody that could kind of settle things down a little bit, runs the offense very well, could get the ball to a guy like Allen Robinson, no question, has no problem turning around and handing the ball off too. If they don't bring back Trubisky, I think in all likelihood it's going to be draft a quarterback and bring in a veteran that's going to get you a couple of years. And if that's the case, why would you look no further than Ryan Fitzpatrick? I mean, he's the guy that has done wonders for the teams that he's been on and has also turned teams over to younger guys as well. So if they go in the draft, I wouldn't be shocked if Ryan Fitzpatrick goes to Chicago, although I do really like that Alex Smith move as well, if that's possible.
Yeah, I don't know. And, I still think there's a lot of upside in Darnold. I mean, we got to remember Sam Darnold's still only 23 years old. So, if he gets out of the Jets, and everybody thought Darnold was a sure can't miss coming out of college. So, maybe you roll the dice and make that trade and hope that you can unlock all that potential that everybody saw in Sam Darnold a couple of years ago.
Be interesting because you'd be going from one cold weather area to another cold weather area. And we know how those Southern California quarterbacks have done in cold, although Mark Sanchez was pretty good the first couple of years he was with the Jets as well. So I wouldn't be shocked. So those are a couple of different options for the Bears. You're looking at Darnold, possibly Alex Smith, maybe a reunion with Mitchell Trubisky. Now, I guess this is the other question then. If you believe that Jameis Winston's going back to New Orleans and you believe the Bears are passing on Mitchell Trubisky, where does he go?
I said this to Joe the other day. I think the perfect landing spot, whether he's the starter or the backup, I can totally see Mitchell Trubisky in Dallas.
It would be a good situation because if he's a starter, that's a perfect scenario for him because he has weapons. He has more weapons than he would have in Chicago. So, and if he was a backup, you'd have possibly somebody in front of him he could learn under and maybe take over a Dallas team. That would be an interesting move and a very good move in my mind.
Well, I mean, more than likely, Dak's going to be in Dallas for one more year. The Cowboys are probably going to franchise him. So I would imagine that Dak Prescott would be there for a year. So, you sit there for a year behind Prescott, and then you take over next year if Dallas doesn't bring him back at that point.
That'd be a very, very interesting situation. Sorry, we're both kind of looking over at the Blues game that's going on. Just about 3 minutes left to go in the game. Blues have about 20 seconds left on the power play, down 2-1. Out shooting the Sharks 32-30 as we speak. I guess they're just really trying to figure out how to play a team other than Arizona. That's what it kind of looks like right now. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about Scott's one big thing today. So make sure you come back here on Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. And we're back here on Crunch Time on ASTV Productions. Wags, Joe, and Scott. Scott, let's get to your big thing for today.
All right, so my big topic that I want to talk about today is we all know we started spring training yesterday. And I want to kind of take a look at the Cardinals and compare the Cardinals right now and in the next couple of years to where the Dodgers were 4 or 5 years ago as far as young talent coming up and kind of being the cornerstone of this ball club and setting the Cardinals up for a long run of dominance in the Central. So, everybody's talked about the Dodgers and how good they were. Think about the Dodgers 4 or 5 years ago. You had a Cody Bellinger coming up. You had a Max Muncy coming up. You had a Kyle Seager coming up. Kershaw was there, but you had a young Walker Buehler coming in your rotation. Urias was coming up. You had Dustin May that was in the background, Ginger Guard, if people don't know who Dustin May is. So you had all of these guys coming in this Dodger organization. And then you had a couple of veterans like Justin Turner that you brought in that were starting to become studs, and you had the guys like Kiki Hernandez. So then so you kind of see where you were blending in those older guys, the veteran guys. You moved out that generation before the Puigs, the Gonzaleses, those guys that were there and had a playoff run for a few years in the early 2000s. Now let's take a look at the Cardinals real quick, and you can kind of see where there's a comparison there. So the Cardinals still have Yachty, and you still have Adam Wainwright. But you've got the young catcher in Kisner who's going to be your backup, and then you've got Ivan Herrera coming behind him in a year or so, which everybody says is going to be one of the top young catchers in baseball. Okay, so you went out and got Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. So there are your staples for the next 7-8 years. You got Paul DeYoung, who's a young shortstop, who Joe and I talked about the other day. Was a really,
I think the Blues might have scored.
I think the Blues scored. I think we're tied.
As a game time correspondent checks in.
Game time correspondent.
Go ahead, Scott.
So anyway, so you've got Paul DeYoung, who's kind of become that staple. He was the Rookie of the Year candidate, came in second. He's been an All-Star. He's right there. He's your young power guy at shortstop. Then you've got young guys in the outfield. You look at the 3 outfielders you've got this year in Bader, Carlson, and O'Neill. Harrison Bader's the oldest of those 3 guys at 26. A lot of the national media is starting to talk this week about Dylan Carlson. Really, they expect him to be in the hunt for the Rookie of the Year. And you've got more kids coming in that outfield. You got John Torres, who's one of the top outfield prospects in baseball. He's ranked 20th as outfield prospects coming. You've got a couple more outfielders. You've got a young outfielder in Trey Fletcher, who's also considered a really good young outfield prospect. You've got a guy like Johan Oviedo coming in the rotation. You got Matthew Libator, Zach Thompson. You've got these young pitchers coming. You've got Nolan Gorman, who was the third base prospect, who's a top outfield, who was a top minor league prospect, moving to second base potentially in the next couple of years. And then you've got more kids coming behind that. You've got a kid like Jordan Walker that you drafted last year to play third base, first base DH, that a lot of people say has the most power of any kid drafted in the draft last year. You've got the kid Mason Wynn, who's a shortstop / pitcher. So the Cardinals have all of these really, really good top-level prospects that are coming in with this group that you have right now. And you can almost kind of compare that to the Dodgers, when you've got the Flaherty and you've got Dakota Hudson coming back, you've got an Alex Reyes, you've got the guys in the bullpen that you have, that are throwing heat all over the place. So you can kind of see that comparison where the Cardinals are kind of building in a lot of the same ways that the Dodgers did to really have a dominant run in this division over the next couple of years.
I 100% see that. And it once again goes back to us thinking Mo's not really got the long play in mind when really he does. And I'm going to throw this question out at you because after seeing the news about Nolan Gorman potentially moving to second base, I kind of got to thinking, I'm like, well, is this the reason why they kind of let Colton Wong move on? Did they really envision this and hope, in a sense, that Nolan Gorman was going to be the guy in the next couple of years where they felt like they don't need to pay Wong long term, give Tommy Edman a year or two at that position, let Gorman get practice at it, continue to develop, and then 2 years from now, he's your starting second baseman. And you talked about earlier today, you sent it out. It's like, if that's the case, then you've got Paul Nolan is your infield and all of that power. I mean, is that something that was potentially going through the organization's mind? Because we now see that the long play has been the plan all along. Is this just another extension of that?
You kind of look at it and you think, well, maybe it was. Maybe when they realized that they really had a chance to bring in Arenado, because you had to find another position for Gorman if you weren't trading him. It was either the outfield or second base, and we know how loaded the outfield is. So if Nolan Gorman can figure out how to play second base and do it pretty well, I mean, Matt Carpenter was a decent second baseman early in his career. You would think Nolan Gorman, as young as he is, could figure that out and be at least a decent second baseman. I mean, hell, Mike Moustakas moved to second base and played pretty well the last few years. So if Gorman can become that guy, and all of a sudden you're getting 25 or 30 home runs from your second baseman, your shortstop, and your two corner infielders, plus you've got all that youth in the outfield that we've talked about, Carlson, and then hopefully O'Neill and Bader develop. Otherwise, you've got these other kids that are coming in the next year or two. I mean, this team could really, really be stacked. Plus, like we said, with that pitching, I mean, there's just one top prospect after another coming. I mean, we didn't even get into guys like Angel Randon and those guys that are a little bit younger that didn't get moved in the Arenado trade. I mean, the pitching ranks are just stacked for this team. Plus, who knows? Maybe we add Jake Odorizzi. I mean, that's still a legitimate possibility. So, I mean, this team could be just absolutely dominant. I mean, they could be setting themselves up for the run that we saw in the early and mid 2000s, where they were just unstoppable in the Central Division.
Yeah, I would say so as well. This team has the makings of, I don't know if you'd call it an MV3, but it could turn into that. I mean, you have Dylan Carlson second. You'd have Paul Goldschmidt third, Nolan Arenado fourth, or however they want to do it. That's a possible MV3 right there. Could be an MV4 if Paul DeYoung has a bounce back year. So this could be a very fun lineup to watch. Now, I wanted to ask you, I talked about those four, and I asked Scott about this, and I want your thoughts, Wags. So I was listening to 101 the other day. Basically, Carlson, Carlson, Arenado, Goldschmidt, and DeYoung. Over under 100 home runs. Go ahead.
Oh, I would have to say, the four, they'd have to average 25 apiece. I'm going to go slightly under. And I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I just think in this day and age, the outstanding, just crushing the home run hitters are kind of not being phased out, but it's a little bit of a different game. I think we're going back to the small ball era. So I'm going to say slightly under, but only by a couple home runs.
See, I went over. I went like 120. I told Joe last night I thought you'd see Goldie hit somewhere around 33, 34, Arenado in that 36, 37 range, DeYoung somewhere between 25 and 30, and then Carlson right around 20 is kind of where I was at, which gets you right around in that 115, 120 range.
And that'll win you a lot of games.
Achievable. Yep.
Oh, yeah, definitely would win you a lot of games. Now that you say that, it does make a lot of sense. I just think maybe not year one, but definitely year two, I could see that being the case. So I'm sorry, I'm splitting my attention between this overtime and the show. Anytime Mike Hoffman has the puck on his stick, you're pretty excited. And I just want to do a quick shout out to Caitlin Miller. Hi, Caitlin. Thank you for watching. We appreciate you listening in and hopefully getting some great sports knowledge. But kind of jumping back to your point there, guys. Yeah, I think you got four guys that could just absolutely mash. And yes, Busch Stadium isn't like a hitter's ballpark as far as home runs are concerned, but they still can get it out of Busch Stadium. I mean, we've seen what Paul Goldschmidt can do, no question. And at least for Nolan Arenado, he gets to play more games at Wrigley Field, and he absolutely feasts at Wrigley Field. So I could see that by far being something that, happens is 120 home runs.
Yeah.
Well, and just imagine.
Go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, Joe. Didn't mean to cut you off there, Joe. Just imagine that. We talk about those four guys. Imagine if on top of that, Tyler O'Neill hits 25 or 30 home runs.
My goodness. Oh, yeah. He also has a Gold Glove, too, doesn't he?
He does.
I cannot believe that we doubted John Mozeliak and what he was doing. How could we be like that?
It's amazing. It's amazing what a couple of weeks will do, isn't it? Not only to make the moves that he made to add to this team, but then to move Fowler out of here as well. You got to give Mo a lot of credit.
Wags, I remember you saying maybe Doug Armstrong needs to talk to him a little bit. I think Doug Armstrong had a conversation with him, and we just don't know the gist of it yet.
He must have. And Lester does bring up a good point, and this is something that we definitely need to think about, is they're going to be doing something with the baseballs this year. They're going to be changing them up a little bit and kind of deadening them a little bit. Do you think this affects the home run totals this year?
I mean, some guys it will. I don't think it's going to affect these guys as much because if you look at the home runs that Arenado and Goldie hit, they're not those big, high, towering home runs. They're more line drives. DeYoung's kind of the same way. They're more of those line drive type home runs. So I don't think it's going to affect them that much. Hopefully it does affect a little bit. I would love to see the home runs overall in baseball go down a little bit and bring the game back to guys making more contact, hopefully seeing more doubles and triples. And, that's the thing. I think if guys like DeYoung, Goldie, Arenado, if they're not hitting 35 or 40 home runs, I think they're still hitting 25 to 30 home runs, and maybe they're hitting 40 or 45 doubles on top of that then. So I don't think it would be a bad thing even if that did happen.
Yeah, and also bring back the speed aspect of as well, running the bases. We've got Harrison Bader, and he's done wonders for us on the base paths. But if you start having other teams starting to focus in on that a little bit more, it does change up the concept of the game. And then you throw in the potential DH, and there's even more, because then if the balls aren't going out, does that change the mindset of what a designated hitter is? Will this actually in turn benefit the National League because they've got guys that are used to playing a more versatile role? It opens up a lot of different possibilities. Although when I sit back and think about it, I guarantee you that if this year home runs are down, quietly baseball will bring the baseballs back from last year.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Joe.
I don't think you really want the, home run era back. I mean, I'm not saying they're trying to get rid of the home run era, but this is becoming home run or bust, and the Blues just won it. But anyway, let me get back to my point. I think baseball is trying to get back to not so much whitey ball. You know what I mean? Not like hit and run, bunting a runner up. You're not seeing so much of that. You're trying to see guys maybe hit the gaps a little bit more, not swing for the home runs. You know what's really killed the game in my mind? And I don't know what you guys think about this, but launch angle. Launch angle has killed this game because now guys are swinging for home runs. You guys kind of get where I'm going with this, or no?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, launch angle is something that nobody ever talked about. You never even heard about launch angle until 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, that just wasn't something that was thought about. Nobody was trying to hit home runs. You were trying to hit line drives, trying to hit gap to gap. And if you had power, the ball was going to get out of the ballpark. And I think that's what they're wanting to get back to. They're wanting to get guys just more contact so that there's more action in the game. Like I said, you have doubles, you have triples. I mean, because there's nothing more exciting in baseball, honestly, than seeing a fast guy run around the bases for a triple. I mean, there's just so much going on in those type of situations. So I think that's what they're wanting to get back to. They're wanting to see guys make more contact, really cut down on strikeouts. Just, get more action going on the base paths and at the plate, and not just have it be home run, strikeout, walk every hitter.
So the question is that going to be what makes baseball exciting again? Or is there other things that they're going to have to do or can do that will bring that excitement back to baseball?
I mean, that will help. I mean, you have to admit it gets pretty dull when you watch an inning and it's strikeout, 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 maybe a walk in there, single, strikeout, strikeout, home run, strikeout, strikeout. So if you have action, guys, all kinds of things. You put the ball in play like they used to teach everybody in baseball. Good things happen when you make contact and put the ball in play. You know what I mean? Just imagine, if Harrison Bader starts putting the ball in play, Tommy Edman starts putting the ball in play with their speed. That's the one thing we don't talk about with this Cardinal team. 3 of the fastest players in Major League Baseball, foot speed-wise, are on this team, and Harrison Bader, Tyler O'Neill, and Tommy Edman. So if they can make contact and hit some doubles, steal some bases, it could be a lot of fun to watch this team on top of the home run and double power that the middle of that lineup provides.
It'll be interesting to see what they do at the top of that lineup, though, if it is Tommy Edman leading off, or is it Harrison Bader?
I think it's Tommy Edman. No question. I think Harrison Bader at this point in time isn't reliable enough to be a leadoff guy. And I think, just like other people have said, I think, Ferrario is one of them, that you bat Bader ninth and you give yourself the potential of a double leadoff situation in some cases. I think that's probably more likely to happen this year.
I think it's more likely, but I think it's going to be I think it's going to be more of an open competition in spring training than we think. You know, I think if Bader goes in and shows that, okay, I'm taking walks, you know, I'm bunting the ball, I'm using my legs a little bit more, I'm cutting down on my swing, I think he's got a real shot because again, Tommy Edmonds not proven either. So I think there's going to be a good chance that it's an open competition and whoever is hot is going to get that opportunity. And again, I know a lot of Cardinal fans don't want to hear this, but we're going to see a whole bunch of Matt Carpenter more than likely at second base, and especially in that leadoff spot because Tommy Edman really struggled against right-handed pitching last year, and we know Matt Carpenter is left-handed and he kills right-handed pitching. So if Tommy Edman struggles, we very well could see a platoon at second base and Carpenter playing against right-handed pitching.
Well, I'll tell you this: if Matt Carpenter just learns to lay the bunt down when they put the shift on, he's going to be a lot more successful than he has been the last couple of years. All right, we're going to take another break here on Crunch Time. Coming up, we're going to have Joe's big thing, and I think it may have to do with what we were just talking about as well. So make sure you come back here on Crunch Time on ASTV Productions.
Hey Crunch Time fans, my name is Graham Forsyth. I'm the host of Coffee with Graham and the Prospect Show on ASTV Productions. On Coffee with Graham, I talk to athletes, coaches, and whoever else involved in the amateur sports scene in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And on the Prospect Show, I talk to the best young hockey prospects from around North America. You can catch all the coverage on ASTV Productions. You can catch Coffee with Graham on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. Central Time. And for the Prospect Show, that show airs every Friday at 8 p.m. Central Time. Hope to see you there. Have a good one.
And definitely make sure you check out Graham's shows on ASTV Productions, along with all the other great shows that are on ASTV Productions. We just want to shout out Behind the Mic coming up on Friday. Saskatoon Blades radio play-by-play guy Les Lazaruk is going to be on, as well as McGill University's Scott Walford. So make sure you catch that out as well on Behind the Mic. And now it's time to get to Joe's big thing. And like I said before, I think this has got to do with a little bit of what we were just talking about, Joe.
A little bit. I mean, if you want to call it that, it's about baseball, but it's not really. Why is there a salary cap?
It is.
Why is obvious, but why is there a salary cap in every other sport, but not in baseball? And on the other side, is the salary cap useful or not? I just want you guys to discuss and debate on this. I just never understood it. If you're going to have it in every other sport, you need to have it in baseball too, in my mind. And if people don't believe in it, you need to just get it out of sports in general and have some kind of rule associated with that sort of thing. But go ahead, guys. Tell me why you think I'm crazy or not. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Wags.
You're crazy, Joe. You're crazy. No, I mean, every league is different. That's the thing. It's not like every league is owned by the same entity. It's not like Major League Baseball owners have NHL teams and baseball and football teams and basketball teams. Like, they don't have all four. So it's not like you have that grouping of people together. You have to look at the different unions as well. Some unions fight harder than others to make sure that their players are compensated for. You know, we were talking about this before the show. Scott brought up the great point that Major League Baseball for the longest time has fought for their players to give them the best opportunity to make the most money possible in the time that they're allowed to be playing. And that's what it comes down to. They're not going to sign an agreement that puts a salary cap on their players. The other leagues, in order for them to get to be able to play, they had to agree to a salary cap. That's just how it works. Major League Baseball is a big time generator of money. Just look at last year in the middle of a pandemic, okay? They signed a major television contract when everybody else was trying to scrape together money. They got like $1 billion or more because of that. Then you turn around and you see the Mookie Betts deal, the Fernando Tatis deal, just all these massive contracts. Money's coming in one way and going out the other way, but it all works because that's the way the system is set up. When you talk about the NHL, the NBA, the NFL even, that's just not the way things are set up. And yes, the NFL is probably one of the highest grossing leagues out there. But before that, up until, I would say the early to mid 90s, NFL was a niche sport like the NBA and the NHL. So they set it up, and that's what it is. Baseball is America's pastime for a reason. It's been around forever, and it's been profitable forever. So I just think that Major League Baseball, for the players themselves, they have it right, but that doesn't necessarily going to work for the other 3 leagues or the other 4 leagues if you count the MLS.
Yep, I totally agree with you there, Wags. In baseball, I think, Joe, honestly, what baseball needs to do, I don't know that you need a salary cap, but I think you need a floor cap. I think you need a cap that says, okay, every team has to spend this amount of money on their payroll, because you have teams like Pittsburgh, and not so much anymore, but for years in the 90s and early 2000s, Kansas City was the same way, where they had revenue sharing and everything else, but those teams weren't putting that money back into the ball clubs. The owners were putting that money in their pocket and saying, "Oh well, we can't win. Sorry, we can't compete." But I think there needs to be a floor cap where every team has to put so much money into their salary cap. I don't think there needs to be a salary cap in baseball. I know you said the luxury cap doesn't matter to you. You don't think it counts. I think it does to the owners. I mean, we've seen it happen in the owner. I mean, that's why the Red Sox traded Mookie Betts, because they didn't want to be that far over the salary cap or over the luxury tax. The Yankees didn't make a lot of moves this year because they didn't want to be that far over that luxury tax. The Dodgers are way over it, but they don't seem to care. They're like, oh, well, we're going to get fined for being over the luxury tax. We're going to have to pay that tax, but we're going to keep winning. But, most teams don't do that. And, I made this point to you earlier, Joe. I think, like Wag said, some of the sports don't have the economic resources that Major League Baseball does. A sport like hockey needs that salary cap because they don't bring in the TV contracts, and they don't have some of those other ways to bring in the money. So they kind of have to make it work and keep salaries low. The NBA, like I said, the NBA finds so many ways to work around that. Look at the super teams that we have. The guys in the NBA that suffer are the mid-level guys that start to be veterans, and they get released, or their salaries get cut, or they get traded to bad teams. How many times do you see an NBA trade where, oh, this guy got traded to this team, but it was a salary dump basically, and then that team's just going to buy him out of his contract and release him so they don't have to pay those contracts. So that happens, and the NFL's the same way. I mean, how many times have you seen veteran guys that are really good players get cut because your quarterback's making $45 million, and so you're going to cut 4 or 5 of these guys that are 33, 34 that are only making 2 or 3 million, but they're Pro Bowl level players. But you can go to the draft and get somebody cheaper than that, and it doesn't hurt your salary cap. So, the NFL, I kind of wish they would get rid of the salary cap, or at least change the way they do things. But again, like Wag said, and like the point that I made to you guys earlier, Major League Baseball's players union is so much stronger than the NFL. I mean, the NFL's player union doesn't really do a whole lot for the players, where Major League Baseball's fights and fights and fights. So that's the big difference as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I think you have to look at it also that when it comes to like Major League Baseball, their contracts are guaranteed. In the NFL, there's very little guarantee for contracts. So you can sign a player to whatever the hell you want to sign them to, but you don't have to actually pay them that entire thing as well. And yes, there's other pieces, cap hits and all that stuff factor into it. But for the most part, you sign a football player to a $45 million contract, you may only pay him $10 million of that because you can cut him after 2 years. Whereas in baseball, you sign a guy to a 7-year contract, unless you get crazy with the cap gymnastics as far as maybe trading some money between teams like Colorado did with, giving the Cardinals $50 million, you're on the hook for that entire contract. So you can't necessarily have a salary cap and have those massive contracts that players are wanting, because it just won't work out that way as well. And I think for the NFL especially, guaranteed contracts are something that if they go that route, they have to eliminate the salary cap completely, because you're not going to have the numbers that you're going to be able to pay, or that you're going to want to pay these guys and be able to stay under the cap with the amount of guys that you have on a team as well. And I think guaranteed contracts is where the NFL needs to go, because you're getting so many complaints and so many past players that are just bashing the NFL for, not getting paid for what they're worth. You get all these holdouts, and you got just tons and tons of things wrong with the NFL and how contracts work. I think they just need to go to guaranteed contracts, get rid of the salary cap as well, Scott. I don't know what you think.
I agree. That's what they need to do. And the NFL players, of course, would love that. The league's never going to do it. I mean, it would have to be a huge fight. And again, the union leaders in the NFL just aren't strong enough to make that stand and make it work. But you talk about all that. Think about the retired players in the NFL. You know, they don't take care of those guys. The older guys that played in the 70s and the 80s when the league was brutal, and going back to the 50s and 60s. You know, there's a lot of those guys that have head trauma and have, you know, CTE and all kinds of stuff. And because of the way that the Players Association have done things in the NFL, you know, a lot of those guys didn't even have insurance through the league. You know, I mean, the NFL Players Association has done an awful job of taking care of their players, as well as the owners too. It's like, okay, you broke your backs for us, but now you're 35 and you're washed up. See you later. If you end up in the street, not our problem. You know, and so the NFL Players Association has to do a lot better for their players, as does that league.
It absolutely does. And I want to go to the NHL real quick because I don't know how these amounts are like, oh, it's going to go up by this each year. It's going to go up by that each year. Can you really explain this to me, or Scott? Because I don't understand it. And it makes no sense. Why does it go up a certain amount? Why does it stay the same? Obviously, I know why it's staying the same now because of COVID and everything. But why does it go up, or why does it go down?
Money.
No, I mean
TV contracts, advertising dollars. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Right now, like you said, there's a reason why the cap is staying where it is because of COVID, because advertising dollars are down, revenue is down because you're not having fans in the stands. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. When you cannot count on the revenue, you can't count on the salary cap going up. I mean, the NHL has been banking for next year on Seattle entering into the league and having an influx of revenue because obviously new team, more butts in the seats, new merchandise, all that kind of stuff going out. But that may not happen because we may still not have full capacity when the next season starts with Seattle entering it in as well. So that's exactly where the salary cap comes in. Is it's all about revenue. And I think that's what Major League Baseball was kind of fighting against. And I think their argument was made tougher because they don't have a salary cap. If they had a salary cap, I can understand them saying, hey, maybe we can't go out and spend the money on players that we used to because we're not getting the revenue. But because they have no salary cap and they've been putting out all these bloated contracts for so long, you can't make the argument that, oh, we're losing money, we can't pay anybody, when you sit there and turn around and pay a guy $500 million to play on your team. That's where I think Major League Baseball got in trouble.
I agree with that as well.
So, all right, we're going to take another quick break, come back and recap just what happened in the Blues game. So stick with us here on Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Alrighty, back here on Crunch Time on ASTV Productions. Wags, Joe, and Scott with you. Got a couple minutes left to go here in the show. Blues game just wrapped up. An overtime victory for the St. Louis Blues. David Perron nets the game winner with just about a minute or so to go in the game. Interesting game tonight. First time that they played a team other than the Arizona Coyotes in about 2 weeks. They got to take on the San Jose Sharks, a team that's kind of on the decline, but a team that also doesn't give up and fights to the bitter end. The Blues open the scoring tonight with a goal by Mike Hoffman. Now has 6 goals on the year, so it's good to see him starting to pump in the goals and feel comfortable. But then the Blues got down 2-1 in the second period with goals by Gregor and Leonard, and that trend continued till late in the third period with the goalie pulled. Mike Hoffman, once again, that name, puts a shot on net, hits off of Martin Jones, right to Braden Shen, who puts it into the empty net, sending the game to overtime where David Perron's heroics get the Blues the full 2 points. So I know we're doing a quick analysis of the game that just ended, but what did you guys see tonight in this game? And are you expecting a little bit less of a hangover come Saturday night when they face the Sharks again?
This team, and I was watching our good friend Theo. He was doing a show yesterday on ASTV at 1:00, and basically, I asked the same question: is this team a cup contender as comprised now? He asked the guy he was doing the show with, Anthony, and basically what he said is no, because they can't seem to get the goals when needed. Tonight, they got the goal when they needed it. 2 goals when they needed it. Mike Hoffman was huge tonight. He's a guy that's, in a way, much maligned because, you know what he can do on the power play, but he's not a 5-on-5 player. He's not one of those guys that really goes hard in a defensive zone. He likes to go to the soft area of the ice. And it works very well for Mike Hoffman. And I'll tell you what, it seemed like a dull game until that third period. I know I didn't get to see the game tying and game winning goals. But it just seemed like a lifeless Blues team. And resting a Colton Parayko does make sense though, because Colton Parayko has been dealing with something. There is no way this guy should regress how he has this year in terms of skating and everything else. So I hope we're starting to turn a corner. It's just this isn't the same Blues team I thought I was going to see before the season, if that makes sense.
It's just taken a while. Mike Hoffman's starting to score some goals. They're trying to get back in a rhythm, and you got to remember it's been a weird year again this year. I mean, like White said, they played the same team 7 games in a row, and you've got a bunch of new guys trying to get comfortable with each other. We've talked about this a million times. This team's still trying to get into a rhythm, and everybody's trying to get to know each other and try to get in sync and figure out what this team's identity really is. And hopefully they settle in. I mean, they played pretty well before that Arizona 7-game series. They'd won 3 or 4 in a row before that. So, I think they're going to settle in. I think they're going to be fine. And I still think they're a cup contender because they're going to get healthy. The big question, though, and Joe brought it up, is Colton Parayko. Is this just something that you can rest for a couple of days and it gets better? Is there something seriously wrong that we have to worry about that he's not going to be all right all year?
I'm really hoping it's not something serious. The fact that they continue to run him out there, though, kind of leads me to believe it's not like ridiculously serious. I don't think they would have risked him long term if it was anything that would prevent him from finishing the season. The good thing about right now, though, is you are going up against the Sharks, the Kings, and then Anaheim. So even if he is out for an extended period of time, like a week or so, it's not like you're playing the Vegases or the Colorados. Yeah, these are still teams that you need to go out and beat, and they're NHL teams, so you want your best guys out there. But this is probably the most opportune time for him to get that rest without necessarily crippling your back end. And the way that Justin Falk's playing right now, the way that Torrey Krug is playing right now, who came back tonight after missing the third period of the last game against Arizona, I think it gives you also a peace of mind knowing you've got defensemen that are playing well. Marco Scandella came back tonight as well. So I think this is kind of the opportune time to sit a guy like Colton Parayko. And, you got to remember, we're about a month and a half into the season right now, this season. But if you look at everything that went down as far as no preseason games, we're only about a month into what would be considered a regular season. And it takes about a month or so for a team to really start to get going and start to get into that rhythm. And when you throw in the fact that you've had to miss some games due to COVID, not on your end, you had the 7-game series against Arizona, it's hard to get into that rhythm. So I'm not worried about the Blues right now. Come back to me next week. And if we've lost a couple of these games against San Jose or LA or anything like that, then I might be worried. So we'll see how that goes. A 3-2 winner for the Blues in overtime tonight. Another game against San Jose on Saturday at 6 o'clock. So make sure you check that out. And also make sure you come back every night at 9 o'clock, Monday through Friday, for Crunch Time here on ASTV for Productions. For Scott, for Joe, I am Wags. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.